Hey, thanks for joining us for our Sunday message online. You're about to listen to a talk recorded live from one of our Sunday gatherings. For more information about when and where we meet together, then please head over to bracklatabernacle.org.
Good evening. So today we're continuing our series on We Want You Here. We want God here. And that includes every part of our life, not just church on a Sunday, but every part of it. And so today we are talking about we want you here in the area of finances, of money. I grew up in Cornwall, and so my first jobs included working in a fish and chip shop, in a restaurant, a hotel, and a pasty shop. So I did lots of jobs, but my first job earning proper money was doing a paper round. Now you might have the image of an American film where someone's riding a bike and throwing a newspaper. Well, but don't get that image in your head because that wasn't me. I don't know what American newspapers are like, but British ones are much bigger, They have lots of supplements in them and they're huge. So when I did my paper round, it was too big to fit in a bag. So I actually had one of those trolleys, like elderly people use to do their own shopping. I had a trolley. And it wasn't just a normal trolley, it was a luminous trolley as well. So for that embarrassing job, I earned £14 a week. And so with that well-earned money, I put £1.40 took it to church for my tithes, and the rest I saved up. And I saved and saved for months, actually over a couple of years, and I eventually earned enough money to buy a laptop. Now this wasn't a spontaneous decision. I put a lot of planning into it. I wanted the best specification, the best value, because I lived in a house of 6 people, and I had 3 sisters, and we had one computer between us, and so having my own laptop was amazing. And so when my laptop arrived, I was so happy with it. I loved it. And money's like that. Sometimes it can make us feel really happy, can't it? But there was another time, I remember when I was at university, I went into the bank once and I was at the counter, and there was a woman a couple of counters down from me, and she started crying. And then she was shouting and she was screaming. And I can't remember what I said, but I said something about it to the woman who was serving me at the counter. And she said to me, "Oh, it happens loads," she said. "Money is the most emotive thing after love." And so today, before I get started, what I just want to say is I recognise some people in the room are very comfortable financially and don't have any worries about it, but other people in this room might be struggling with debt or struggling to pay the bills. And so there is a lot in the Bible about money, and I'm not going to be able to cover it all tonight, but what I want to say is that if you are struggling, feel free to come and talk to me or one of the other leaders, and we'd be happy to talk and pray with you about it. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to briefly cover society's view of money, and then we're going to take 3 biblical principles from the passage that Karen's just read to help us manage our response to it. So, firstly, our society. We live in a society where the message is the more money you have, the better. Because the more money you have, the more you can buy, the more you can experience, the more you can protect yourself, the more you can look good, smell good, and so on. 70% of adults take part in the national lottery, despite the odds of winning it being 1 in 45 million. Just as a side note, you're 64 times more likely to be struck by a meteor. But also what's interesting is that 90% of lottery winners continue to buy lottery tickets even after they've won, because they just want more. People want more and more. But if we look at verses 9 and 10 of the passage that Karen read in 1 Timothy, chapter 6, we can see some stark warnings about the dangers of wanting more money. Those who want to get rich fall into a temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. This is such a descriptive passage, isn't it? I don't know if there's another passage that has so many warnings in it, and they're very visual. Falling into a trap, plunging, a root growing, lots of images that you can imagine. Fraud, theft, forgery, robbery, murder, abuse, bribery, slavery, prostitution, corruption are frequently fueled by greed, by the love of money. And you might be thinking, well, that's a bit dramatic. I'm not going to do any of those things. I just want a bit more. But maybe the last sentence is actually a more serious warning for us. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. What we desire is what we prioritize, what we spend our time on, and it affects the decisions we make. And so if you're prioritizing money, that will have an effect on your relationships and on the decisions you make in work. So I think these verses show us that love of money is subtle but serious danger. It's subtle because an animal doesn't go out planning on being trapped. It's unintentional, but it happens, and when it happens, it's too late. So it's a warning for us. And so what I want to ask today is, how can we avoid these dangers? How can we prevent ourselves from loving money and wanting more and more when so many people around us, so much advertising around us, promotes us, which causes us to want the same thing? What do we need to do? So number 1, be content. Verse 6 says, godliness with contentment is great gain. Contentment is being satisfied with what we already have. Benjamin Franklin said, content makes poor men rich, and discontent makes rich men poor. In other words, some rich people are never happy no matter how much they have, whereas you can have some poorer people who are very happy because they've learned to be content with what they have. How can we be content? It was Paul who wrote this letter to Timothy, and he also wrote a letter to the church at Philippi, and he said this, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. In other words, it's not a natural response to be like, oh no, everything's gone wrong, I'm so happy and content. That's not the natural response. But you can learn contentment. Paul said, I have learned to be content. And so we can learn too. And we learn it through God who gives us strength. In Hebrews 13:5 it says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. We can learn to be content because no matter what the situation, God will never leave or forsake you. He loves you, and if you trust him, you have eternity with him. So number 1, be content. Number 2, run the right way. So I'm going to get a runner up here to come and help me. Micah, can you come up? And Craig, could you help me as well? Do you see there's a little poster there? Could you hold that up for me?
Is it because I'm a runner?
No, you don't get to be the runner. So Craig is holding up a poster. It's a heart with some pound signs in it, right? So this symbolizes the love of money. And just to be clear, we're not running away from money. Okay? If it's payday, you don't say, oh no, I don't want pay, because you need money to pay the bills, right? But what we're running away from is the love of money. And so in verse 11, it says, but you, man of God, flee from all this. Run, 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 run. Okay, so Micah's running away. But anyone know what's the next part of that verse? Come back. We're not just running away from loving money. We're doing something else. So if Alec could stand up for me. Alec's got another poster over there. And on his poster, it says righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. That is what he's got to run to. Okay, so run away from the love of money. Run towards righteousness. Run, run, run. Godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Brilliant. Thank you. You can sit down now. Oh. What I want you to remember is that running to those things was not easy. Micah couldn't get to godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness easily. There were some barriers in the way. It was difficult. And I want you to have that picture in your mind, because it is not easy when everyone else is hanging around and loving money and wanting more money. It's not easy to run after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, gentleness. That's not an easy thing to do. It's hard. There are barriers. But the next part of the verse says, fight for it. Fight the good fight. Hold on to it. Because that is what we need. And I was writing down those things yesterday. I was thinking, how can I stand up here and preach about godliness and righteousness and gentleness when so often I am not those things? But you know what? We get up and we fight. Because if we fall down on our running, we remind ourselves, this is why Jesus died, to forgive me, to help me, to give me new life. So you get up and you keep running in that direction. So number 1, be content. Number 2, run in the right direction. And number 3, be generous. Verse 17 says, command those who are rich in the present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so they may take hold of life that is truly life. In this church, we encourage the giving of tithes and offerings. And it's not because God needs it. The whole world is God's. He has infinite resource. But we give tithes, we give offerings, because that's what the Bible tells us to do, and it guards us. It guards us against greed and against trusting in riches which are so uncertain. It's good for us, and it's good for others. This passage isn't just about giving tithes, it's that your whole life, being rich in good deeds, giving generously. God cares about the poor, the needy, the vulnerable. It's all throughout the Bible. And when we give to people who are in need, we are showing others his love. And if you're not used to giving money away or things away, this will be hard at first. But as you practice giving, and you can see how people are impacted by this, it becomes a privilege, and you begin to realize that it is more blessed to give than to receive. Do you remember my laptop that I was so pleased about? It was really good. It was a brilliant laptop, and it lasted me through my GCSEs and college, and then on to university. And then when I was in fourth year of university, I lived in a house with some friends. And one day, someone broke into my house and they stole my laptop. Ooh, yeah. And they didn't just steal my laptop. They went through all my stuff, through my drawers and my desk and everything, and they took anything of value, which wasn't much because I was a poor student. But yeah, so I didn't have insurance, and when I was in fourth year at university, I had to travel to different placements all around Wales. So I couldn't easily get a job. It was really difficult because I wasn't going to be there for long. And I remember the police coming round and just being really gutted that someone had come and taken my stuff. And the next day, I went to church. And there was a couple in that church. They were so generous and kind. Every Sunday, they'd just say to a load of students, "Come back to our house." And Steve and Fiona was their name. They had 3 young children, so very brave of them, but they would just cook an amazing roast dinner, and we would stay there for hours talking and laughing. And I went to church feeling a bit rubbish, but I came home after being at church and at their house. I came home feeling loved. And what then happened was someone from church rang me and they said, "I'd like to buy you a laptop." And I was like, "Really?" Okay. And someone bought me a laptop. And a few days later, I had post. And in the post, there was a cheque. And it was a cheque for £300, which was more than what I'd lost. And the cheque was an anonymous cheque. I don't even know how you do that. But there was no name on it. So I didn't know who to say thank you to. And my housemates who weren't Christians were just amazed at this. I didn't know who to say thank you to, but I also was amazed at God's goodness and kindness to me. And I won't forget people's generosity to me, and it stayed with me throughout the years, and I want to do the same for others. I want to be rich in good deeds. I want to be generous and hospitable and kind. I want to do the same for others. What about you? Will you be content with what you have? Will you run towards righteousness, godliness, faith, love, gentleness, and endurance? And will you be generous in how you live? I'm about to finish up now, but these verses that Karen read to us from verses 6 to 19, they were all about money. But you might notice that in the middle bit, he seems to get a bit distracted when he talks about Jesus. He kind of deviates away from the subject of money. And he just starts describing Jesus and God. He said, "The blessed and only ruler, the King of kings and the Lord of lords, who alone is immortal and who lives in unapproachable light." He just stops to focus on God. Because God lives in unapproachable light. We couldn't get anywhere near him if it was just down to us. But unapproachable light, God came down to us. He came down to us. Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. That's what it says in Philippians 2. He didn't hold on to his wealth and riches as God. He gave it up, became nothing, became a servant, made in human likeness, and he humbled himself to death, even death on a cross. God made himself approachable for us. He was so generous to us so that we could take part in his family, be heirs to his throne, reign with God. And so in our giving, we need to remember what God has done to us, what God has done for us. He's been generous to us. Jesus is our ultimate example. Verse 19 is in giving. That's when you know life that is truly life.